Okay, so welcome to the part 2 of my OCD video. This video is going to be more about advice that I have for overcoming OCD. Maybe I'll split this up into like 5 pieces of advice or something. No, I think I'm just going to ramble and tell you guys the biggest advice because I know what it is. Once again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a mental health professional. So please be sure to seek out actual therapy. The best place that I can recommend to start if you have OCD specifically is NoCD, because that's NOCD. It's an app and it's a website. You can just look it up, because you don't want to just go to any therapy that's just going to be a talk therapy or talking about your past or your trauma, because if they don't have ERP experience, so it doesn't really matter if it's NoCD, but as long as they have ERP and OCD specialization, they'll know how to deal with you. But if they don't, they genuinely will not know how to deal with you. Most therapists do not understand OCD, and the tactics that they use go exactly against what you want to do. So that's really important that you make sure you're finding the right therapy. But I highly recommend the biggest thing you can do for yourself is find therapy, because it is the hardest thing sometimes to talk about these OCD topics, because it's unlike other mental health disorders. It can make you feel like you're an absolutely horrible individual and sick individual, especially when it's on those sexual or harm related themes. And so those can make you feel like you cannot share them with somebody. But my biggest recommendation to you is to take the leap of faith for yourself and for your own mental health and for the future of your life. To find a therapist that's ERP or OCD specialty, and take your time with them and make sure they're the right person before you share everything. But just share everything, because that in and of itself is going to be an exposure to the fear of saying these things, and minimize the fear that the OCD tries to make you feel. So that's my biggest number one piece of advice, is go find therapy. So this video can't replace therapy, but I am going to give you guys a little bit of tips and tricks and advice from my experience with OCD, my lifelong journey with OCD, that only started getting treated with the correct therapy about 1.5 years ago, and give you guys some of my knowledge from that experience, okay? I'm going to put on some chapstick. So the first and biggest piece of advice I have for dealing with OCD is accepting uncertainty. This was a game changer when I realized this. And it's not going to just be like an instant relief from the anxiety. That's one of the things you have to realize, is that the treatment to OCD is the opposite of what you want it to be and the opposite of what you think it's going to be. And it's a paradox. OCD is a paradox, if you really think about it. So, and the reason OCD is a paradox is because OCD is the doubting disorder. So OCD makes you doubt absolutely anything and everything. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be absolutely anything. And it's usually focused on one thing at a time, at least in my experience. And it will be the biggest threat that your brain thinks is the biggest threat. So that can be as small as the door isn't locked. It can be as big as I'm a P word, or I killed somebody and I don't remember, or whatever. So it can be like a really crazy thing, or it can be something that seems more normal, but the phone's ringing. But as long as it is an obsession that you're doing some sort of compulsive behavior or mental action to reassure yourself over and over and over and over and over, it's OCD, and you don't have to think twice about that. But the reason that it's paradoxical is because OCD makes you feel like there's something you need to do, or there's something you need to think about or remember or bring up in your mind to gain certainty about this fear. And it seems like that's so normal, and that's what you should do, and that's your mind speaking, and like, why would you question that? And that's what you're going to do. But the reason it's a paradox is because that in and of itself is what causes the problem. And it doesn't seem this way, because it seems like the problem causes the problem. Like most problems, it seems like the door might be unlocked is the problem, but it's actually not the problem. And this is hard to understand, because when you're so deep in an obsession, especially when you have obsessions that last for years at a time, trust me, I have been there. It's like, no, that is the problem, because I haven't even had any other obsession in a year. Like, this one obsession is different, right? It's so different. No, it is all the same. But OCD will always trick you to think it's different and will always trick you to think that it's actually the nail in the coffin and you can never overcome it. And when you feed into the OCD, when you try to overcome it in the way that it wants you to, that actually is the OCD. So that's the paradox of it all. It's very strange and it's very hard to understand if you don't have it. But the first key to recovery is accepting uncertainty, because every single OCD obsession should be based in a doubt. Okay, so it always is going to be something. If it's not a doubt, then it probably isn't an OCD, because, well, that might not necessarily be true, but it has to be a doubt that, or something that you're afraid of, right? If you're not afraid of it, then it's not OCD, because the problem is if you have OCD and you're trying to fix it, it's got to be something that you're afraid of, that you're obsessing about, that's causing distress. If it caused no distress, even if to other people it might cause distress, like it might be seen as a problem to other people, if it doesn't cause you distress, then it wouldn't be OCD. But if it's causing you distress, then it's going to be OCD. And typically with OCD, it's a doubt that's causing you distress. And the doubt can present itself in all sorts of ways. Like I just said, it can be a doubt about the door being locked. It can be a doubt about your hands being clean. It can be a doubt about the kind of person that you are. And that could be because of a million things, right? But it's gonna be a doubt that you're afraid of, that it latches onto. And so that's why we can just not even worry about what obsession specifically that you're dealing with, but we can know that accepting the uncertainty around it is going to help everyone with OCD, no matter what it's obsessing about. That it's going to be based in some sort of uncertainty and certainty that you're trying to gain by doing the compulsion. The obsession is about an uncertainty. The compulsion is trying to gain the certainty. And sometimes it does temporarily, but we know that doing the compulsion is like a drug addiction, and it doesn't work more and more and more. It works less and less and less, and you get more and more uncertain. So that is the paradox. So the starting point foundation for the OCD recovery is just accepting uncertainty in every aspect of life, because uncertainty doesn't actually exist. A very important realization to come to if you have OCD is that certainty is not real. Just like perfection is not real. And people are much more accepting of the idea that perfection doesn't exist, because we're like, oh, that, nobody's perfect, blah, 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 blah. That's supposed to make us feel good. Like, don't worry about being perfect, because nobody's perfect, even though people still try to be perfect. But people are much more like understanding of that idea, but people still think that certainty exists, because certainty exists in like science. Like there's things that are like 100% or whatever. Actually, maybe there's not. I don't freaking know. But I think that like certainty exists in that like 1 × 2 is 2, or like 1 + 1 is 2. Like there's like certainty in the mathematics world, and it's a word that means something, that something is 100% true. But in reality, in your brain, from a philosophical standpoint, and when we're dealing with OCD, certainty does not exist, because certainty is actually an emotion. Certainty is a feeling. And this step back realization can really help you to realize that 2 people can feel certain and uncertain about the same real world truth. So there can be this, there's this truth outside of our brains, technically, that exists. But 2 people can feel completely different about that truth, because the certainty within our brains is not real. Okay, I'm not a philosopher, so it's hard to explain this, but do you get what I'm saying? There's basically always a way that you can doubt something, because you can get down to the nitty-gritty of like, am I really here right now? What if I'm in the Matrix? What if I'm really dead? What if I'm dreaming? So that's an important place to start, is realizing that there is no such thing as certainty, and certainty is actually just something that you feel. rather than being this external thing. What does it look like to actually accept uncertainty if you have OCD? So your OCD, it's going to be focused on a specific thing. And if you have OCD for a long time, you probably know what that is. So you probably know what your obsession is right now. And it probably is on something right now because it's always something, right? So you probably know what it is right now. And accepting uncertainty is going to look like saying to that obsession, it might be true. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it is true. So another tip is that you can use non-engagement responses, especially when you're dealing with those ruminations and those mental obsessions and compulsions that are seen as pure O. You can use non-engagement responses to the thoughts rather than your usual response in your head, which is to like say, well, this, and this, and I know this happened. And well, if I remember this and I pull this up correctly and instead of all that, which feeds into it and is a compulsion, you can respond with maybe, maybe not. Maybe this thing is true. Maybe it's not. Anything is possible. And my favorite is just, I don't know. Because even when you do the maybe, maybe not, sometimes it's like, well, maybe this and then maybe that. And then what if sometimes it's best to just like let down the reins, like really truly surrender to this uncertainty and just be like, I actually don't know and I can never know. And that's an important piece too, is to say that you'll never know, because OCD is still going to feel like, well, later down the line, you're going to figure this out. Like it's going to find a way to be like, okay, you don't know now, but you're going to go, but you're going to just find out somehow. Really, truly saying to yourself, I don't know and I'll never know, is a great way to let down the reins and let go of that control, because OCD wants control so bad. And it presents, I think it tends to present in people that desire control, that have a obsession with control. And you might not even realize that, but it's like, in my experience, it's like, it's always about having this control. And that's why a lot of times it focuses more on those things that are ambiguous. And what's the word for not real? I always forget that. There's certain things that aren't actually physically in the real world. There's a word for that, but I forget that word every time. But that's why for me, it would focus on certain things like sexual things, or, if if you texted someone something, because like for me, the text was more of a trigger than what I actually said, because the text doesn't really exist. It exists in my phone, but when I turn my phone off, it's like, where is that text? But it could affect me. So it's like certain things like that it's like, I can't really put my finger on it when it's not right in front of me, or like, sexuality or things that you're attracted to, right? You can't really like fully grasp and put your finger on these things physically. Or if you're like a bad person, right? Or like what your intentions are. These are like, I keep forgetting this word, but they're like not physical concepts. They're out in space. They're not real. You know what I mean? They're not something that you can physically touch in the real world. And my OCD tends to find those ones the hardest to overcome because it wants that control. So if you're dealing with things like that, one of the biggest things that's going to help you is every time that comes up, your response, not in a compulsive way, not like okay, I got to say it 3 times, 5 times, just very relaxed, very without trying. You're just letting down the reins and letting go of the control and saying, I just don't know, and I'm not going to know. So that's the first start. That's the first step, is the response prevention. Honestly, even though that's the second part of ERP acronym, I think the response prevention is the main thing, because there's going to be certain themes that it's hard to like expose yourself to per se, which is the first part of the ERP acronym. The exposures is definitely really helpful. And like, I think having a therapist is the best way to go about those, because they can help you do them as like a homework and give you more of a guideline. But sometimes it's just going to be like something that it's like, what I have to do today, like I'm just trying to figure it out. Like if I'm going to be able to complete X, Y, and Z, and like I'm going to do this, and this, and like, what if I said this? And sometimes you can do like loop tapes for those things, or like write things out that make you afraid, but it's sometimes hard to tackle those things when they just come up. It's hard to get ahead of them with an exposure if they just come up. And so that's why the response prevention you can use for any obsession at any point in time that comes up. Even if you don't have the ability to do an exposure for it right in that moment, you can always response prevent. And that is kind of the key, honestly. Like, that's really all you need to know. I don't really need to say anything else. I'm going to say a couple more things, but saying maybe, maybe not, and actually accepting that you'll never know is kind of the answer. So the answer is that there is no answer, and that's why OCD is paradoxical. But another tip that is helpful is going to be getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So a lot of times when you can go down the wrong path when you start trying to, accept uncertainty, because you're gonna be like expecting that to make you feel better. So you're gonna be expecting to respond with maybe, maybe not, and just feel better in that instant, or feel more certain in that instant. Like, even though you're supposed to be accepting the uncertainty, like you're wanting something to do to get rid of this feeling. That's why you're seeking out this video. So you're thinking that, like, after I watch this video, or after I do what he says, I'm going to feel better. So the next big piece of advice that's once again a bit paradoxical is actually allowing yourself to not feel good whenever, wherever. Especially because, like I said in my last video, it likes to latch onto things that are supposed to be fun or enjoyable, or when you're receiving a lot of love, or things are looking up for you. Unlike other mental illnesses, it really likes to latch onto those, which can make you feel crazy or make you feel like you don't have an excuse to feel like you do. But OCD loves to latch onto those things because it knows you don't have an excuse to feel bad, and it knows that it's going to strip away the happiness from those things. And it's the fear of that happening that causes it to happen. Okay, so a way to work on that aspect of OCD is you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, meaning that you just let these feelings take you over and you move on with your day. So that might look like getting right out of bed before trying to solve things to feel better before you go to work, right? Or like when you're going to a party or you're going to something fun, don't do those things that make you feel better. Like I said in the last video, I used to go on a run before going, go to the party feeling so shitty and feeling like a piece of shit, or feeling like you're gonna panic, or whatever it may be. That's a different thing with the panic, but it kind of is along the same lines. Allow yourself to feel like shit. That's going to be a big piece of it. And when you're applying those non-engagement responses, like maybe, maybe not, or I just don't know, you need to realize that the goal there is to not do the compulsion, respond with uncertainty, lean into the uncertainty, but then leave that negative feeling there as it is. So that's going to be the next piece of implementing those non-engagement responses, especially for the rumination type of stuff, is actually just letting go of the control and then letting go of trying to escape the feeling. So feeling the feeling, even looking at where it is in your body, describing where it is in your body, doing meditations that are meant to surrender. I recommend looking up surrendering to anxiety meditations. I found really good ones in the past, rather than just those meditations that are take a deep breath in, whatever. Because that's what you're going to want to do on the regular for OCD. You're going to want to surrender to the feeling of anxiety. And sometimes you can do meditations where you sit there, you don't engage in any sort of solving or figuring things out, and you just focus on the feeling in your body. And those can be really helpful if you are someone who wants to implement meditation into your daily routine, rather than just a normal meditation. But then throughout the day, you just have to be okay with feeling like shit and still getting out of bed right away and making breakfast and exercising and going to the gym, even if you feel like shit, or going to fun social things, even if you feel like shit. Because maybe we can get into the third piece of advice, which is to never avoid anything. So this kind of goes hand in hand with feeling uncomfortable and leaning into things. And leaning into the feeling is never avoid anything. So never avoid going to an event because of your OCD. If, your dog just died, then that's fine. But if you feel like you're going to say no to having your friends over because you're going to have intrusive thoughts about them, or you feel like a bad person, or you like can't get over your current obsession, so you don't want them to come over. Don't do that. Never ever do that. Throughout my life, I never really did do that, and that's why, like, I guess, like I said before, I would be described as like a very functional person with OCD. I think most people are, and I think most people don't avoid things. But if you do avoid things like more frequently, that's going to start to make everything worse. That's going to start to make all of the anxiety stronger, because that is really drilling into your brain that there actually is a problem and that you actually can't handle it. And so it's only going to be worse, and the desire to do those compulsions is only going to get stronger. And you'll also find that when you just do things, even if you feel bad, you feel better, right? It's all paradoxical. It's all backwards. You'll realize that if you had those friends over, or you did go out of the house, or you did go to the gym, or you did get out of bed earlier, you actually would feel better. But your OCD is telling you that you need to stop and take the time to do all the compulsions before you do those things. It feels that way, but it's not true. So you have to take that leap of faith that I think I need to do all of this in my mind, or check everything and feed into my OCD before I do X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to do it the opposite way. I'm going to throw that all away. I'm going to throw everything I'm feeling out and just go do things, even if it's not perfect, even if I can't do it exactly great because I'm not mentally present. That's fine. Okay, that's going to be step number 1, honestly, is never avoid things, and get out of bed and just do things even though you feel like shit. Then apply those non-engagement responses when those obsessions come up and the ruminations come up as a compulsion, and then allow yourself to feel the uncomfortable feeling itself physically. Allow yourself to feel the anxiety. Because what you want to do is, over time, you're going to teach your brain that anxiety itself is not anything to fear. Because even though OCD seems like it's based upon a specific thing that you're obsessing about that feels so personal to you, that's the paradox in it all. And that's the sinisterness of it all, is that it feels so personal. It feels like it's based in this thing. But it's actually the same thing for everybody, because all it is a fear of anxiety. Okay? It's a fear of uncertainty, but it's also a fear of the anxiety that uncertainty brings out. That's why you don't like uncertainty, because it makes you feel bad. Okay? And so a lot of what it all is, like the core of it, is uncertainty, and then also just the bad feeling, anxiety, and you running away from that. And that's why people with OCD try to prepare themselves for fun events, because they know it's going to creep up, because they're supposed to be enjoying something. So you're thinking about enjoying it, right? You're thinking more actively about how you feel because you want to enjoy this. But because OCD actually is a fear of anxiety, by doing all of that, you're strengthening your fear of anxiety, because you're strengthening your brain's neural pathways that tell you that you are going to feel like shit and you're not going to enjoy this, and you can't handle that. You can't handle going through a vacation and not enjoying it. So you're going to do all this stuff to prepare, and it's just going to make it worse, right? So accepting the uncertainty, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable feeling, and never avoiding things is 3 big steps. Never avoiding things and not preparing yourself in any way to feel good because you did your compulsions and you figured everything out. Just letting yourself feel like, I honestly might feel like completely disconnected and completely detached and not even present at all. And I'm just going to do that. And you're going to go through so much, like when you're recovering. And like I said, I'm not even fully recovered. So I'm not even here to tell you that it's going to go completely away. That's probably not the case for most people, especially when you've had it your entire life like myself. I don't have a life before OCD that I'm trying to get back. Okay, and that's fine if you do too. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. But you're not trying to get it to go away completely. You're really not trying to get it to go away at all, because trying to get it to go away is what causes it. Okay, that's why it's so paradoxical and kind of hard to talk about in a straight train of thought, because it's like convoluted concept. But that's why it's one of the hardest, most debilitating mental disorders, because it's very paradoxical. It's very paradoxical, and it's very sinister how it works to make you work against yourself. It's like a parasite. So the next thing that I would give as a piece of advice is to do exposures. So this is going to be 5 things, okay? There's going to be 5 things. So I'll put that in the title because there's going to be one more after that. To expose yourself to the anxiety. So like I said, I think working with a therapist is the best way to do that, because you can talk to them about your specific issues, take that leap of faith and talk to the therapist and just lay it all out. They're not going to be able to arrest you. They're not going to be able to judge you because they're a fucking therapist and this is their job and they're licensed to do it. Okay, and so make sure they understand OCD so that they know what you're saying and they've seen it before. Because nothing you could say to them is anything crazy, because they've heard it all if they really work with OCD. So take your time to find someone who works with OCD. No CD is a good place to start because they work on all that. But that's going to be the best way to kind of like actually make sure you're doing the exposures properly. But you can do them yourself. And I can give you some examples of what exposures looks like for me, so you can kind of take that and apply it to your own situation. I would have a lot of obsessions that were like, I commented something inappropriate, completely based on nothing. But it would be like, if I had, like, I would be replying to a comment, and I'm like kind of famous on TikTok. So that's why it would eat away at that, right? Try to tear down that aspect of my life because it's a good thing. It's this thing I'm successful at. So it tries to tear it down. And I would have an intrusive thought about one of my, I'm a bad person obsessions, whether that be sexual or whatever. Usually for me, it was sexual related things. And I'm thinking about these weird sexual things as I'm replying to these comments in my comment section, which I have thousands of. So it's like hard to keep track of it. It's hard to have control of everything. And I feel fine while I'm commenting it because I'm still focused on that obsession. But then all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, I'm like, well, I was so in my head about that one like sexual obsession that maybe I just blurted out something really inappropriate in that comment. And I can't really like specifically know for sure because it's ambiguous and it's up in the air and it's not like physically real. And I can't see it right now unless I'm on my phone. So of course that led to a lot of obsessive checking and going back and rereading because it was like an actual action that I could do as a checking. And those are going to be the easiest ones to do ERP with, is the ones that are physical actions. You can do it in your head, like I was saying, but it's really hard, and I'm still not over all of those ones. So that would be a thing that I dealt with a lot and would ruminate all day over, thinking that I ruminate and then physically check. I would try to stop physically checking, but I would still ruminate. And what the rumination can look like and something like that, whether it be like an email, a text, or a comment that you replied to, is like having to vividly remember when you typed it out, or vividly remember when you texted it, and vividly remember exactly what you said. And so sometimes tapping into memories is basically checking. You can check through your memories just like you can check in the physical world now. Checking through memories is 100% a compulsion. So even though that seems like it's a pure O, there is a compulsion that's happening even though it's just not visible. So that was something that I dealt with. And so that's an easy one to see the exposures with. So the exposures for that is that I would actually go and type out these thoughts that I was having in texts, in comments, in Instagram comments, in TikTok comments, in emails, and type out these crazy things like, you ugly, fat, disgusting bitch, and say nasty things about myself that I was obsessing about, like those bad person and sexual obsessions, and actually type them out and like hover over that send button. And, increase like the uncertainty of like where you're doing it, like do this in public. And like I would increase the uncertainty of like closing out the tab. Like, did I really delete it? Like, oh my God. And then it just like, it flared up the uncertainty so high. So you shoot above what you already were feeling. Because before I would feel the same way. I would feel like I said something out of like crazy, like something way out in left field when I didn't at all. So like that's how OCD can be. It can be almost like borderline delusional. Like I'm basically feeling like I said this crazy slur comment when I didn't even at all. I didn't even write that at all. And that's how crazy OCD can get. But then it's like the way that you combat it is like actually type it out. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, the anxiety is even higher because you actually typed it out. So it's more like based in reality that you might have done it. And cutting out those compulsions. So you do the exposure. So that's an example of an exposure that you would do. And then the response prevention is what we talked about before, which is, well, I talked about the mental one. So I talked about accepting uncertainty, but accepting uncertainty, I want to tie back into that. That's the same thing as cutting out the compulsions too. So cutting out the compulsions, we can tie in as a piece of advice that is under the umbrella of accepting uncertainty, because I would have to accept the uncertainty that I might have commented what I thought I commented or that I typed out. I'd have to accept that uncertainty without doing the compulsion. So those two things go hand in hand. So if it's a physical compulsion, cut all of them out. Obviously, that's like the first step. Cut them out, make them happen less. Or you can also do something which is setting a timer. And if you're like, just getting started and you can't cut them out entirely, you could say like, okay, I did this exposure, or this just happened that I like think I commented this thing. I'm going to set a timer and I won't get to check that I commented it for like 3 or 4 hours. And sometimes you'll find by the end of the timer that you don't feel that obsession anymore. And that helps your brain learn if you never do the compulsion. The best thing to do would be to never do it. And the anxiety is going to be the highest when you face things that way, but that would be the best way. So I guess cutting compulsions is kind of like another piece of advice in there, but that comes under the umbrella, at least in my eyes, like of accepting the uncertainty, because you're going to have to accept the uncertainty if you don't do the compulsion, if you don't seek the uncertainty, if you don't seek the certainty through the compulsion. So that's my other advice, is basically ERP, right? Like thinking about, okay, what are my triggers? What are things that trigger me? Whether it's like a physical thing that I'm avoiding or like a mental thing. And you can do exposures by like recording loop tapes where you're saying those things that you're worried about yourself. Like, I'm a bad person, or I did X, Y, and Z in the past. And like, just like recording out yourself saying that the worst case scenario is true and everything's going to go wrong. And I am this horrible person. And that is true. And just like living in that and bathing in that feeling that loop tape being played causes, and like allowing yourself to just believe that for a while and really think it's true. So sometimes you can also use agreeable statements with the OCD. You can accept the uncertainty by saying maybe, maybe not, but sometimes you can also just say, I guess it is true. I guess that's true about myself, and I'm going to just agree. So sorry, this video is kind of convoluted. I think I will make videos in the future that are more concise and I like give more of these tips in a quick format. But today I'm just testing this out with just talking about these things and throwing all my knowledge at the wall. So I hope that you're getting something out of this nonetheless. So the last thing that I'll say, so this video doesn't get too long, is that for recovery, another piece of advice, aside from doing all of those things that actually combat OCD, which is the most important, accepting the uncertainty, responding with non-engagement responses, or just agreeing with what the OCD says, and facing your fears, exposing yourself to your fears, and not avoiding anything, and cutting the compulsions. I think there might be one thing that I was missing there. The last thing I would say that's going to be helpful is just having a good life routine. I'm sure you hear this one all the time because everyone will say this no matter what, if you have mental illness or not. This is a piece of advice that I feel like you see probably too much with like wellness influencers and stuff, but you don't have to be a crazy wellness influencer lifestyle. You don't have to be a fitness guru. You don't have to eat a salad every single day. Just, what's healthy for you, and what your healthy range of living is, and just try to live within that. Getting out of bed, like I said, is definitely accepting the uncomfortable feeling was one of the pieces of advice. So accepting the uncomfortable feeling while you do your daily routine is going to be important. Try to stick to doing your daily routine and still doing it even when you feel like you don't want to, because you'll teach yourself that you can do it even when you feel no motivation and that you feel like you're not going to be able to. You'll teach yourself that you can, and you'll realize that you actually can live your life more than you thought you could. And it's going to build up strength. And that's one thing you can do immediately, right away. You can start to implement more of a routine and more of getting out of bed. And I don't go to bed early. I try to, but I never have gone to bed early, and I still, deal with insomnia and stuff. So it's like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you like, oh, you need to get up at 6 a.m. and you need to like go to bed at 10, because I don't even do that. So that's not going to happen. But however, it's possible for you to try to get the closest to 8 hours to sleep. I would recommend that for sure. 8 hours of sleep. And definitely eating healthy and exercising as much as you can. You know what I mean? You don't have to be like a fitness influencer or like getting out of bed at 6 and eating like a protein bar. Like, you don't have to do anything crazy. Just living a relatively healthy lifestyle and being active is gonna help your mental health in general and give you a better foundation of mental health and mood and positive mood to give you the motivation to implement the things I said, which are the more important things in the beginning of the video. So I hope that this helps you guys. Please let me know if there's any other OCD subjects specifically you'd like me to talk about in the comment section below, or mental health stuff. And please let me know if you like these videos, because I know it's not my typical content that I usually make on here as ASMR. If you want to see more ASMR, be sure to subscribe. But definitely let me know if you like these mental health advice videos, because I just know that I like consuming this content. And that's 9 times out of 10 why I start to create content, is because I like to consume it. And I like to watch videos that help me with this stuff, because I deal with it all the time. So if I could help any of you guys, that would be really awesome to me. And I feel like I have a lot of knowledge about this stuff, even though I didn't study it in school and I'm not an expert. So like I said, don't, have this replace professional help. So thank you guys so much for watching. I wish you guys all the best of luck with your OCD journey. Try to write these things down, remember them, and implement them. Come back to this video if you need a reminder. Don't do it compulsively. But remember those things. Accepting the uncertainty, responding with non-engagement or agreeable responses to those mental ruminations and compulsions, allowing yourself to feel uncomfortable and getting comfortable being uncomfortable. ERP, right? Just doing the exposures, the actual response prevention, the ERP itself, and doing the exposures if you can, right? And then also having a healthy lifestyle as best you can. Those things are going to be the key. And it's not overnight. It's not over a year. Don't fool yourself or make yourself feel like you should be recovering within a month, or even within 6 months, or even within a year of implementing these things. Because even if you do it to the best of your ability, there is no timeline for you to get better. And you're going to have ups and downs, and you're going to have waves, and that is okay. And allow yourself to rise and fall, and just keep doing your best at implementing those strategies as you can. Okay. Don't put pressure on yourself that you need to like completely be healed in any sort of timeline, because that's just going to make yourself feed into it more. Okay. So I wish you guys all the best of luck with recovering from OCD, with your lives in general. I hope everything is going well for you, and I will see you guys later. This channel is mainly about ASMR, so if you want to see some ASMR, be sure to subscribe, and you'll see some relaxing ASMR. I love ASMR. I know it kind of helped me relax, so if you guys like that, then you can also subscribe for that as well. But I'll be making some more mental health videos. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.